sexually identify as a helicopter is one of those jokes that exists in the most cringe corners of the internet. It is one of like 8 stock phrases that shit-tier NPCs masquerading as true believers of logic and 5th grade biology will manage to get out. It's a joke made by edgy teens and douchebags, and it's for those reasons that when the story first came out, I avoided reading it. That was dumb. The story ended up being foundational to my gender and my understanding of both queerness and humanity. I mean every word of that. Isabel's story did something so brave, that was so controversial, she was shamed off the internet and worse. I'm not going to get into the incredibly sad story of what happened to Isabel. If you're curious, there's a Vox article that is very much worth a read. Link is below. No, today is a day for plastic gender, or plastique gender, if you will. And for my Patreon plug, because I am not monetized, and I'm likely never going to be. I spend my time telling queer folk to arm themselves, calling Serpa holsters dumb piles of fuck, and generally pissing off Google every way that I can. So if you want to support me and get access to the videos before everyone else, join me over on Patreon. It really means a lot. Alright, let's get into it. According to Know Your Meme, the joke originated in 2014 on a Team Fortress 2 forum that got moved to social media by a gamer. Yet another gamer moment, L. Originally a copy pasta, the implication is supposed to be that it is as ridiculous to think you could change your gender to a helicopter as it is to change from a man to a woman. But Helicopter's story takes a Chad meme-like approach and simply says, yes, it's all ridiculous. Human beings are ridiculous. Stop acting like we're not, and expressing who we are is best done by something that adapts to us and to that ridiculousness rather than having us cut off parts of ourselves to fit narrow definitions. The human body is a series of fossilized sticks surrounded by sacks of fluids with a really advanced compost pile in the middle and a PlayStation 3 with a camcorder wired into it at the top. None of this is not ridiculous. We are, and I want to emphasize this as much as possible, completely ridiculous creatures if you think about the componentry of human beings just a little bit. We try and ignore this on a day-to-day basis, let alone when we are at our best and most capable. We don't think about it when we are jumping over a barricade or throwing a pizza in the air, because we'd have to sit with the horrifying nature of existence if we did and all of its messy, awkward consequences. We work best when we don't think about that layer of abstraction. But it's there. Gender is a thing that many people don't often analyze until they bump up against the limitations of a narrow structural binary. To many cis people, there are 2 limited choices, and everything you do is most easily contained inside a flavor of the one you were born with. And when many do analyze gender, they view it as an extension or a reflection of a binary rather than a whole new system. Gender is a societal construct, but people often hear that and think, oh, so it's like a crosswalk, lines that only mean things because we decided they mean things. And no, that's one kind of societal construct, but it's not the only one. In fact, those lines are a reflection of a reality that outside of context doesn't make sense. But add back the context of 2-ton death machines being how we get everywhere, and suddenly that construct's importance isn't so imagined. It's easy to hand wave away a crosswalk as something that only exists because we put it there, but it's worth remembering that that is a social construct that was made in blood. It exists because of the reality of cars being on the road and bodies being in the world where those roads are, and a general want from humanity to reduce the body count where we can. And that's just a fucking sidewalk. Gender is how we understand human beings. Fun fact. Human beings can have relationships with roughly 150 people. That's our village. Get beyond that, and you start replacing people with others rather than creating whole new entries in your mental Rolodex. Part of the way we do that is we reduce people to certain categories, gender being one. This has been true since we painted on caves, but Jung, a psychiatrist, posited that we see people as one of a system of archetypes informed by gender. There was a concept from the story that I want you to consider. Plastic gender. The traditional cis narrative is, I am the gender I was born. The trans narrative that fits inside that cis narrative is, I am the gender opposite the one I was born. You know what you are by the absence of the other. Gender exists as two halves that mirror and match each other. Here's a quote from the story. I decided that I was done with womanhood, over what womanhood could do for me. I wanted to be something furiously new. If gender has always been a social construct, then why not construct new ones? The one universal truth is that the world is constantly changing. There's an apocryphal story where wise men are trying to find something that is always true for a king, and the only constantly true thing they can land on, the one thing that doesn't have any exceptions, is this too shall pass. The world is a constantly changing thing, and we are changed by our surroundings. We all change over time, and not only is that okay, that is how we survive in complex situations. The idea of plastic gender is a reflection of this. Who you were, who you are, and who you are going to be are all inherently different, and limiting who you are now because of either who you were or who you are afraid of becoming is folly. They are all different, and you will inherently change whether you want to or not. There is a joke in non-binary circles that is both funny and speaks to a painful lived reality. Man? Woman? No, I identify as a threat. Back the fuck off my homies. Isabel Fall's helicopter story paints the idea of gender as a utility, of gender as a thing that people can harness. Queer culture and queer existences have been a thing of survival for a long time. The joke about trans women all having a blahage comes in no small part from trans women using stuffed animals as a psychological crutch from the discrimination and abuse they face for just existing. The hanky code, an entire coded subsystem of bandanas and back pockets that led to sexual liaisons, came from the physical and legal danger of openly stating sexual preferences. My channel might seem like a fun aberration if my channel is your introduction to queer spaces, but I am one of a wave of people who are queer and making educational firearms or self-defense content specifically aimed at being accessible to queer folk, because we are a minority that is regularly facing lethal threats by just existing. Anne Roth has a fascinating article on National Geographic that is worth a read, link in the description. In it, she studies how quadrupeds, particularly foxes, are able to adapt when they lose a limb. People who lose a limb, it is absolutely possible to move on to a new existence, but there are often prosthetics, years of therapy to work through the loss, and to focus on becoming something new and accessible to be able to afford all that. A fox can survive surprisingly well after losing a limb, and the psychological and physiological recovery time for a limb lost in a fox is the same. The reason for this is they have the ability to embody a new existence. Their diets are wide and varied, their mobility easily modified with a tail, and they are able to establish a new normal very fast. They are inherently liminal creatures, aware of the fragile nature of their own existence without fear of it. A fox will, if trapped, gnaw its own leg off rather than accept being trapped, and the quality of life after it makes that choice is surprisingly decent because it doesn't see itself as having been beaten down into a worse thing. It becomes a new type of creature that's just as fascinating and just as worthy of life and existence. Queer folk have a lengthy history of gnawing off our own limbs. Spending years in the closet will feel like having a limb trapped in a hunter's snare, and jumping out of the closet can end up feeling like gnawing that limb off when friends, family, jobs, housing, so many basic parts of life become places people can decide your existence is a problem. It can blow up your life to come out to those who might reject your new existence. But this is why we accept. We accept each other, we accept people for where they are, we accept ourselves as we are and where we are. Queerness is, arguably, a mental state of acceptance. We don't judge the missing limb, or at least we try not to. We see the different forms of existence and try and shore up each other's weak sides as a group. Isabel Fall's story has a focus on the power of wiring your survival into your gender. The things that become part of her gender extend far, far beyond just the physicality and base layers of gender and get into the wiring of us. And while that isn't entirely possible in a literal sense, I think we can do that with conscious choice and effort. That doesn't go far enough. It's not just that we can do it, it's that we need to. Isabel Fall wanted to get people to think differently about gender, and the response she got was to be scared out of existence. She is no longer able to be reached, and even if you can manage to figure out contacting her, you're reaching out to a ghost, as she is no longer interacting with the world as Isabel. Gender is a thing that speaks to the innate parts of our existence. To challenge it can be to challenge the core of how people understand the universe, and there is power to manipulate there, which in an age of limited resources, that power only increases. Isabel's story brings up the possibility of AI leadership and the dangers of black box AI models that can't be modified or even understood, global warming and how it will make surviving in parts of the planet impossible, and the military's ability to take anything it finds as useful and bend it to its interests, including gender in this case. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Queer folk everywhere, if you're watching this, if it's safe for you to own a firearm, if you aren't dealing with mental health issues that would prevent you from being someone who could safely own a gun, fucking get one. Stay dangerous and keep each other safe. Isabel Fall writes about this specifically. We need to keep fighting or we're going to die. The world might not be in a full-on apocalypse, but we have some truly heinous and evil shit in our immediate future, and we need to get ready to be dangerous in the face of it. And we have to fight with every part of us, including our gender. Thank you all for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Thank you to all of my Patreons here. Y'all are the reason why I get to continue making stuff. If you want to support me directly, head on over to Patreon. It really is the best way to make sure that I can continue making this stuff. Realistically, I am never getting monetized. So if you want to make sure that I can continue making this kind of stuff, definitely head over to Patreon. You also get access to all of the videos a day early. So yeah, head on over there. Hope to see you there. But that is going to be it for me. Stay dangerous, y'all. Keep each other safe. And remember, moral doesn't mean legal. And Stonewall was a goddamn riot. Peace.